We gave him double candy for being the only one. You know? Deserved it. So I want to take a few minutes to focus on this one verse. If you didn't get a copy of the green sheet, we have a few others. And it's always good, although I put some I put some commentary. I put some commentary on the page, and you probably have looked at it already. But see if we just read the verse on its own, I'm curious what questions come up for you as you read it. So the first part of Mishpatim deals with these, with a number of laws that are not either do this or don't do this or this is prohibited, but rather do with these sort of case studies. And here the case study is if a thief is seized while tunneling and he is beaten to death, there is no blood guilt in his case. And then the second verse, Im zarcha hashemesh alav damim lo, if the sun has risen on him, there is blood guilt in that case. Shalem yishalem, he must make restitution. Im ein lo, and if he lacks the means, v'nimkar b'gnevato, he shall be sold for his theft. I'm a little more focused on the first part of on the first verse and the first part of the second verse, but what questions come up for you when you read this verse? What's not clear? Beth? Why do they use the word tunneling? Okay, so I'm not sure I have a good answer for that one, but machteret here, it's a sense, this was how a thief was going to get into somebody else's house. Quite sadly, this is still part of the Middle East, as you probably are very well aware, that this was so that seems to be the case. Jack?
In the Hammurabi Code, which has pretty much the same thing, it is not tunneling, but it's taking a hole into a wall.
Okay, so in the Hammurabi Code, I gotta say, you don't get this at every shul, okay? It's a real bonus, okay? In the Hammurabi Code, it's making a hole in the wall. Okay, that does seem, by the way, a little more, common, right? Than tunneling underneath. What other questions, though, come up as you read this, Mary Joan?
What is blood guilt in this reference to what's going on, right?
Okay, so blood guilt in this case is that the case here is if the thief is seized while tunneling and beaten to death, then there is no blood guilt. So blood guilt would be there's no price to be paid. The person who has beaten the thief to death is not guilty of anything, right? Does not have blood guilt for having done so. And why is that the case? Right? Because it's self-defense, okay? Because this is self-defense, and the Torah here is permitting the use of lethal force for self-defense, okay? And quintessentially in the Jewish tradition, I've quoted for you something from Bamidbar Rabbah, the third source on the page. And it's actually based on some verses in Numbers where we are told to harass the Midianites in verse 17 of chapter 25. And then in the very next verse it says, because they are harassing you, right? And so the Midrash says, harass the Midianites. Why? The reason that you're permitted to attack the Midianites is because they are harassing you. In other words, and hence the sages have said, and this is a famous phrase, Haba lehargacha hashkem vehargehu, which means if someone is coming to kill you, then you're permitted to use lethal force in self-defense. Okay? So what's another question, Susanna? Okay, so did you read ahead? No. Okay. All right. So this is what we're going to get into. The rabbis, and particularly Rabbi Ishmael, is going to ask an interesting question. Which take a look down in Masechet Sanhedrin. Okay, and we're going to read something. By the way, in Masechet Sanhedrin, in the Talmud, this comes as part, right before this is a discussion. Does anybody know of what comes right before this? It's the discussion of the Ben Sorer Umoreh. Okay? It's the stubborn and rebellious son. My son alone had this as his bar mitzvah portion, which we talked about a lot. But the stubborn and rebellious son, you are, according to the Torah, is to be stoned and killed. And the idea behind that, I'm not justifying it. We don't do it anymore. But if you read in the Hebrew, he is done so that because of sofo, because his actually I guess it's the Mishnah where it says nidon al shem sofo. He's judged that way. You're allowed to use lethal force. Because in the end, because he's doing this, you assume that the thief is going to use lethal force against whoever he encounters, and therefore you're allowed to use lethal force against him. In other words, you're anticipating what he's going to do. And so, the stubborn and rebellious son is killed according to the sages because in the end he's going to do a lot worse things, and so you prevent him from doing these worse things by killing him first. Again, not justifying, but I just want you to understand why it's coming there in the passage from the Talmud. So David, a quick question, and I want to read where we are in the Talmud.
I am puzzled by the second half of verse 2. He must make restitution. The last means he shall be sold for his theft. The dead thief has to make restitution.
So no, I think to be very clear, the simple version, you're misreading this, okay, is if there is blood guilt in this case, meaning the person who has killed the dead thief is guilty of something, has to pay a fine, okay, and the simple reading of this would be if you have committed a crime and you can't pay your crime, then the way in which you pay the fee or the fine for having blood guilt is you are sold into slavery. That's the plain meaning of it. It's not referring obviously to the dead thief. You should know that if this confuses you, Ibn Ezra actually says that this is referring to it's referring back to the case right before to the verse at the end of chapter 21. Okay, because he also says this doesn't quite make sense.
I remain puzzled because it does not say that he has to make restitution for the cause of the death. It says he has to make restitution for his thievery.
Yeah, which is why Ibn Ezra agrees with you. Okay, but the plain way to read this, as you pointed out, is not that the dead thief has to make restitution. Okay, and it's definitely unclear. So let's look at the Talmud. So John, will you go ahead and read apropos a burglar who breaks into a house? Go ahead.
Apropos a burglar who breaks into a house, the same is taught in the
Braita, go ahead.
The verses state if the burglar is found breaking in and the thief dies, there shall not be bloodshed on his account. If the sun is risen upon him, there shall be bloodshed on his account.
That's from Exodus.
A question may be raised, but did the sun rise only upon him?
Okay, so just stop for, did the sun rise only, this is strange language in the verse. Okay, if the sun rises on him. Okay, now it could be literally just means on him as he's committing this crime. In other words, if it's somehow in the daytime. Okay, but it's a strange phrasing because, keep going. It could say if the sun is risen and the other piece is doesn't the sun rise on everybody, right? It doesn't rise just for one person. So how is he going to interpret this? Go ahead.
Now, these words must be understood in a metaphoric sense. If the matter is as clear to you as the sun, that the burglar is not coming to your feast, or rather his intention is to kill you, arise and kill him first. But if you are not sure about his intention, do not kill him.
Okay, so the first piece here, and then Andrew, I'll take the question in just one second. The first piece here is that we're not going to read this as referring to the sun as literally the sun rising. Okay, so the whole strategy of reading this as it referring to a daytime crime and a nighttime crime, according to this Braita, is being set aside. Don't understand the sun as being the physical sun. What we're referring to here, as Susanna pointed to, is we're going to read this in a metaphorical sense. And what we're talking about here when we say the sun is clarity. And what is it that needs to be clear to you? And therefore, the way that the sages are reading this is, if the matter is as clear to you as the sun, okay, that the burglar is not coming to you in peace, okay, not coming to you in peace, then you, but rather is coming to kill you, then you can kill him first. And if not, then you should. But if you're not clear about the intentions, don't kill him. So Andrea, and then we're going to read the second part.
So, not metaphorical. If it's at night and you can't see what's going on, and then somebody in your house and you kill them, then you're not going what's going on. But if it's daytime, then you can see what's going on, and you have more attention.
Exactly. For the first reading of this, and Jeffrey T. Gay explains this in his commentary up at the top, at nighttime, you assume a homicidal intent on behalf of the thief, and you don't have clarity, and so you can use lethal force. But as he says in the second paragraph here, if the break-in occurred in broad daylight, it's not presumed to be an imminent danger to life, and therefore the warrant to use deadly force is unwarranted, and then you are held responsible, right? And interestingly, I do just want to point out, right, that as Jeffrey T. Gay says, the biblical scale gives priority to the protection of life, even the life of burglar, over the protection of property, okay? Which is actually quite remarkable if you think about it, right? That you are not allowed to use lethal force even though this person is on your property and there's a threat to your property. The lethal force is not warranted, not allowed during the day, okay? But look at the second, I want to look at the second Braita, okay? Eric, since it's a rabbinic text, and I know how much you love rabbinic texts, go ahead. I want you to jump in there.
It is taught in another Braita. The verse states, if the sun is risen upon him, there should be bloodshed under the county. The question may be raised, but did the sun rise only upon him? Rather, these words must be understood as follows. The matter is as clear to you as the sun, that the burglar is coming to you in peace. Do not kill him. But if you are not sure about his intentions, arise and kill him.
Okay, so the rest of this is explanation. Here's my question. What's the difference between the two Braitas? Okay, and I shaded the important word for you, but Mary Joan, just make it clear for us.
The first one, if you're not sure about it, you let it live. The second one, if you're not sure about it, you kill them.
So it's not quite that. In each one, deadly force is permitted in a particular case, but it's a different standard. Okay? What's the different standard between the two of them? What has to be clear to you as the sun in each one? It has to be, Andrea?
So if you know that this person is, like, has an inventory versus someone who is breaking in for, right, a drunk or is coming to leave for change,
So,
then you have to know who it is.
right, so let's tease out the exact difference. John?
There's a question about whether you know that the person is not coming to you versus whether the burglar is coming to you.
Good. So what has to be clear, okay, what has to be crystal clear to you is different in each reading. In the first reading, what has to be clear to you is that the person is not coming to you in peace. Okay? In other words, what you know is a negative. You know that this person is not coming to you in peace. This person is coming to you with bad intentions. They are coming to kill you. It's very, very clear. The second one is a different standard. It has to be clear to you that the burglar is coming in peace. But if you don't might be coming just to say hello, right? Then what do? You are not permitted the use of force, right? Is this making sense? Right, a little bit? There's it. Yeah, David.
Use some legal language. First, it says, unless you know otherwise, there is a presumption of malicious intent. And the second, it says, unless you know otherwise, there is no presumption of malicious intent.
Say this one more time. Good.
First, it says, unless you know otherwise, there's a presumption of malicious intent.
Okay, and so if I meet somebody, I assume that they have malicious intent, and whoever they are, I don't need to prove anything to them. I don't need to prove anything. I am permitted the use of force because I assume that they have malicious intent. What's clear to me, right? What is clear to me as the son is that they are not coming to me in peace. The second one.
The second says, unless you know otherwise, there is a presumption of no malicious intent.
You presume that there is no, and so the second one, it has to be clear to you. It has to be first so clear to you that they are coming, right, to kill you. Otherwise, you're not allowed to presume that, right,
I
Eric?
was going to say that the first go right to there was, of course, stop and frisk, and for our gun.
Okay, so how we apply this, right, in modern times? Eric made a point about stop and frisk and when it applies and when it doesn't. And I will tell you that in one of the places that we use this text, those of you who are in my parking class, know that we use this text also in trying to figure out modern warfare, right? Because this is not necessarily a case of war, but thinking about those questions of self-defense. What are you allowed to? What is the standard that you have to meet in order to use force? Is a very important and very tricky thing to play out because we get scared, right? And yet you're not allowed to make an assumption that everybody is out there to get you. And so I know that I have brought you, probably too tedious a thing to study on Shabbos morning when Phoenix is just around the corner. But what I want to show you here is that this is, to your point, actually, I thank you for raising that. Figuring, what I want to say here, there are a couple other questions, so let me take a couple other points and I'll finish up.
I think it was asking about I have a different reason to begin with. That is, if he's coming into you at the moment that he's robbing you, and you find him, then it's okay to kill him. But if the sunrise, meaning he's already done the robbery, he's maybe gone home, then you can't go after him and kill him.
Yeah.
It's a revenge.
Right. Well, so I want to say, I don't think, there's nothing here about if he runs away afterwards. Okay, that would be.
There's a time lapse between when he comes in and he steals, and then the sun comes up. There's a time lapse there.
So you're reading the sun as there's some sort of time lapse. Right? Okay, so you can we'll add Richard's reading to the page. Okay, I think the two readings that we have on the page are one, reading it as what's being described here is as a daytime and nighttime. Right, the time of day is what distinguishes. Right, because of what's visible and what's not visible. And the second one is saying no, the sun doesn't just shine on him. What we're talking about here is I put here self-defense in the dark, but it's not literally the dark. It's self-defense when it's Sorry for running late. Carol, I want to say two things. One, thank God you're okay. Thank God you're okay. And those moments are, I think, everything that you said about that prayer of, this is not something I want to do, it's something I feel I might have to do. I will also say my mother had the same thing happen last year. Okay, there was an intruder who came into her house. And so these are not, when we read this story and each one of these things, I think there's it's important to understand that Torah Shabbat Peh, the living Torah, is really something that God forbid we have to struggle with, but it is really part of our life. And the rabbis were trying to tease out these moments for us to try to give us a little bit of help in those moments. God forbid before they take place. Please rise and Tazi Kaddish before Musaf. Sid's going to lead us. Sorry, Sid. He's going to lead this group.